KPBS On Demand is supported by Paint Care, offering households and businesses in California more than 800 leftover paint drop-off sites for recycling. Quantities of 100-plus gallons of paint may qualify for a large volume pickup. Learn more at paintcare.org.
Welcome back to another edition of the KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando.
It began with the Black Plague. Within weeks, the dead began to rise.
This cannot be.
Hunting for human flesh. Now, the few of us that are left have only one way to survive. We must bring the fight to them.
With Pride and Prejudice and Zombies opening on Friday and trying yet again to reanimate the zombie genre with new life, I thought it would be fun to speak with Dr. Arnold T. Blumberg, known to his Twitter followers as Doctor of the Dead, and specifically to talk to him about a very particular kind of zombie, the self-aware one. But first of all, Arnold, I want you to tell my listeners a little bit about yourself, because you have actually taught classes on zombies.
That's right. In a way, that kind of all started. I co-authored a book many years ago with a good friend and co-author, Andy Hirschberger. We did a book called Zombie Mania. And at the time, it was one of the first ever books that really tried to provide a comprehensive look at the zombie genre from its beginnings, feature films entirely, to the present, which at that time we had a cutoff of 2005, and the book came out around 2006. And then shortly after that, I pitched my local university on me teaching. I'd already been teaching comic book literature for many years. I've taught a lot of media and pop culture classes. I've recently done one now on the Marvel films, but at the time, I pitched them on an entire semester on the zombie genre, and it didn't take much to convince them. It was already pretty popular at the time, but interestingly enough, we launched that class the very same fall that Walking Dead started airing on television. So it was a perfect storm at that point. And then since then, I've done so much work in writing and lecturing on the genre and doing a podcast called Doctor of the Dead, and of course being on Twitter and everywhere, and it seems to have become kind of a cottage industry for me.
When you taught this first class on zombies, what did you actually tackle in the class? I mean, were there some people rolling their eyes and saying, like, oh my God, this is like the basket weaving 101, what can that possibly be about? Or
I know for a fact that that's true, sure, and whether that was some people outside of it or even some students in it, absolutely. But one of the nice things about it, I mean, you can't look in the minds of everyone, but I certainly got a sense the very first time that for the most part everybody was pretty engaged in it. And I think what really happened was a few weeks in, when they saw what we were really doing, everybody got into the groove and realized, oh, okay, we're using this, and this is the purpose of the class after all. It is just using that or any other topic, genre, or a selection of films. It's just using it as a way in, as a lens, through which you can then talk about everything, the way media, the way entertainment reflects our culture in terms of race, gender, class, politics, ethics, anything you want to think about. And you just pick a popular topic, it gets people engaged, it gets people excited. If they're fans already, then it means they're predisposed to be happy to be in class and talking. But then you start delving, you say, but see, what this really means is this. And in the course of the semester, we went through a chronological selection of films, 15, 16 movies from 1932 to the present. And then we also filtered in some examples of television, comics, prose literature as well. But really the main spine of the course was feature films. We did that, and that, like I said, that first semester, it really clicked pretty early on. And if there were any people that still thought, oh, well, this is kind of silly trying to find all this meaning in movies, then they did a very good job of covering it because everybody seemed to really be engaged in it.
Well, that's what seems appealing about it. And what seems smart about using that as a topic is that you hear a lot from teachers and people that sometimes college students seem a bit apathetic or not quite engaged in their class. And it seems like taking something out of pop culture like this or Marvel or movies, music, things like that, it seems like it's a really nice hook to get them, to almost trick them into thinking.
Absolutely. And as I always say, the whole point is that's what these classes are entirely about, critical thinking. It's about giving students the tools they need to go out in the world and assess everything around them, all the messages that they're inundated with every day through media, And we exist in a world, obviously, where we're virtually immersed in it in ways we never were before. I often tell students in the last few semesters the story of how, you go to a gas station now and the TV screens are right there. It's not just even radio playing. They're blaring the TV at you. You can't get away from it. And so you need to be conscious of these things. And picking popular topics is just a nice way of framing it so that everybody, you're on the same page initially, and then you start delving and you see what all this really means. And it's not even frivolous in terms of picking the topics, because obviously these things are popular for reasons. People gravitate to these things not just because it's the latest thing, but because it speaks to them in some way. So we explore that. I still remember one of my favorite days was we were talking about The Walking Dead. This was a couple years in, but we were looking back at a season 1 episode that had a very famous scene everybody remembers, where they were doing the laundry by the riverside, and a conversation starts up between some of the characters about how, wait a minute, are we falling back into these really archaic gender roles because suddenly the women are doing the laundry and the men are out? And that was an entire day's conversation discussing, well, how far have we really come in whatever year it was at the time, 2013, 2014, and using a zombie show as a way to then discuss very real issues of gender and people's roles in the culture. So that's the whole point.
All right. Well, kudos for using the brain dead to stir critical thinking.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Do you happen to remember what the first zombie film either you saw or that made its first impression on you?
I've been trying to figure this out because people always ask me that, and one of the things I've actually been able to figure out pretty certainly is, at the very least, I know when I think I first saw Night of the Living Dead, and that may have been one of the first zombie movies, if not the first I encountered. But the interesting thing is, I know now that I think I saw the first piece of that movie, not itself, but as a clip in Halloween 2. And I was a big fan of Michael Myers in the Halloween movies. And when Halloween 2 came out, it was one of the first videotapes we rented. Video stores were just starting. It's like 1981. And we had a videotape recorder. And early in that movie, there's this whole thing where in the first 2 movies, that night they're having this horror movie marathon in Haddonfield. And you see the early moments of Night of the Living Dead at the beginning of Halloween 2. I think that's actually the first way I saw that film. And then I knew I wanted to know more about that. And I don't really remember how, but I eventually then went to actually seeing that in its entirety, and from then on.
So what do you think it is about zombies that attracted you and really hooked you?
Well, I don't think it's really that complicated an answer. It'd probably be the same kind of thing that I wind up teaching and talking about elsewhere, which is that I've always enjoyed a lot of genre entertainment. I'm a big science fiction fan. I grew up with comics, and obviously horror was always a part of it too. Not quite as much as a child, I don't think, as it's become later in my life and as I've delved into it more with the things I do. But zombies were always particularly interesting to me, and I enjoyed some of those movies. And I think it really comes down to some of the basics, which is whether you realize it consciously or not when you're watching it, they have a lot of meaning. They carry a lot of meaning that feels more immediate and more directly connected to you as an individual than, say, a story about a werewolf, vampire, or something like that, because the zombie is really sort of this distorted carnival mirror reflection of you. And I think that even if you're not aware of it, and even myself as a kid, I may not have realized that's what I was going for, it was something that was speaking to me in some way. So I know that I always thought zombies were fun and that I liked those movies, but I can only assume that ultimately they hooked me the way they hook a lot of people, because they have a lot to say about us. And so they feel attractive in that strange, twisted kind of way.
And do you think that's what's given them this kind of long-lasting appeal?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think what really works, and this is not to say, it's not a binary system either. I mean, like, the thing that always amuses me and I always talk about is how the mainstream media, Time and Newsweek and the big papers and everything, they'll always run these articles every 5 years. Zombies are the new vampire. Vampires are the new zombie, as if neither can exist at the same time, or as if we need to trade them off. Everything exists at the same time. And obviously, all these creatures have their role to play in culture, and vampires mean a great deal too, and all these other things. But I would definitely say that zombies, by virtue of the fact that they are such a basic human template and have evolved so much decade by decade to mean so many different things, that you're right. That is a reason for their longevity, And also I think that says a lot about why they've maintained such a level of popularity for so long in the 21st century, and that's because they adapt to serve whatever meaning we might want to place upon them at any given point, and they're just perfect for that.
Well, George Romero, who may not have invented zombies, but I think certainly is kind of the godfather of the modern American zombie.
Sure, yeah.
I think he described him as being the perfect blank slate, the blank canvas that you can kind of write anything onto.
That's absolutely right, yeah. And you're also right about the way you characterized him, too. I mean, obviously the concept goes back a lot farther, but he and his writing partner, John Russo, and all the people that worked on Night of the Living Dead, they definitely started something that, for all intents and purposes now, you grab a person on the street and you say, what's a zombie? Most of the time, it will go back to that Romero concept.
This is the latest disclosure in a report from National Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington. It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder. A widespread investigation of reports from funeral homes, morgues, and hospitals has concluded that the unburied dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims.
And that's still with us today.
It's amazing how that has stuck.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first film, I mean, it remains not only iconic, but effective. I just recently used it again in a class, and I'll be doing that again. I use it in writing classes as well that have nothing to do with zombies, but it provides a lot of opportunities for writing about ethics and family and other things. And you find that if you show it to a class of students, particularly today, who aren't necessarily that enamored with black and white movies or the pacing of a movie from then, it takes them 5-10 minutes. They might laugh at a few things.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
And then a little ways into it, they're reacting to the film, but they're reacting in context. They're saying, oh, I hope Ben makes it, or I hope Harry doesn't cut. And it's involved them. And it just shows, it just speaks to the power of what those people made then, that movie, once you get past a few little bits and pieces that a modern audience might reject, still can involve people and speak to them. And it's just really powerful. So everything Romero started with that, it's still with us.
So, as somebody who's been interested in zombies for a long time, you're fully aware that there's a lot of heated debate in the zombie community about slow-moving zombies versus fast-moving zombies, risen from the dead zombies versus infected people. But you focused on a particular kind of undead, and this is the self-aware zombie. So what differentiates this particular class of zombie from the others?
I say all zombies count. The more zombies, the merrier, is what I always say. I'm often having to explain to people why I definitely count 28 Days Later and why the living, in fact, are more akin to the voodoo zombies that started it all than the reanimated corpses, so they all count. But you're right that as a personal choice, I've become very fascinated with this particular strain that's been going on now for the last few years particularly. It's really picked up in popularity, which is the self-aware group, which a lot of classic zombie fans, and by classic, of course, we are talking more or less about Romero-style zombies. A lot of classic fans reject because they prefer to keep their zombies as that blank slate, that sort of primal horde. But what's really interesting is that we have so many stories being told now with zombie-like creatures that might be a variation on the Romero mold or slightly different, or like the infected, but they're conscious. They're aware of themselves. They retain their human personality. And there's some of the most popular stuff out there right now. And, of course, as you and I have talked about it elsewhere, everything from, like, the movie Warm Bodies to the TV shows like iZombie, it's become a very popular trend. And I think it's saying a lot about where we are as a culture right now.
Well, let's go back in time a little bit and look at, it seems like George Romero kind of set the tone for creating this strain of zombie with Bub in Day of the Dead. He's not a zombie who's as fully self-aware as, say, the young woman in iZombie, but Bub is definitely kind of the beginning of this evolution of the zombie who's kind of starting to question, like, where do I come from? Who am I? What's my purpose?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Do you see him as the root of this?
Well, I certainly think that we can credit Romero and Day of the Dead, and certainly stunning performance by, well, depending on how he credits himself or how you look it up, Sherman Howard or Howard Sherman. He's gone by both over the years. But absolutely amazing performance by him that really set a standard there. So I certainly think we could look back to Bub and say Bub is very much an early example. There are certainly examples of self-aware sentient zombies that go back throughout the entire history of the genre. You can definitely find that in previous stories. It's just that it was more sporadic. You might find an example of it here or there. I mean, technically, even in Night of the Living Dead, there are a lot of things people think they remember from Night of the Living Dead as starting the rules that really aren't there. And one thing that is interesting is the creatures in Night of the Living Dead are actually a little more aware than people tend to remember. They react violently to being hurt. They're like aware of them being hurt in a way that a lot of later versions of those creatures aren't. But Bub, I'd say, we could certainly say that's a good starting point for a zombie that's the Romero reanimated corpse that's starting to be aware of the fact that there's more. His reaction to music, the fact that he's replicating old behaviors, the fact that he creates an actual emotional bond with a father figure that actually builds a rage within him, and some of the things he does at the end of the movie that are not at all zombie-like, but rather very human. It's a really extraordinary creation in that. So, yeah, it's a good place to start for taking a look at how this evolves.
We've been talking about Bub, so let's hear a little bit of Dr. Logan talking about Bub, because he is presenting Bub as kind of this example of what he might be able to do with zombies in terms of working with them and possibly controlling them.
I call him Bub. That's what the club fellows used to call my father. Bub's been responding so well lately, I've let him live. Well, is he alive or dead? Well, that's the question these days, isn't it? Well, let's say that I let him continue to exist. Hello, Bob?
Here are some toys for you.
Some nice things for you to play with. You remember them from before? From before. He's seen the other things before, but the book is new. He remembers. He remembers everything that he used to. Oh, I'm very pleased. Very pleased.
I think Bub is the first zombie that I kind of fell in love with. He is so endearing.
He is. Well, he's like a child, basically, isn't he? I mean, he's in a way also kind of like a pet, and that's sort of the way that he's depicted. He's on the leash, and he treats him like that. And he has that kind of, he's got a puppy dog kind of quality to him.
Well, and I think it plays up one of the things that I've always loved about zombie films, which is this sense that zombies are us, or they were us, and that's what makes them sort of scarier. And sadder. And to me, I think the line that has always summed up what especially a Romero zombie is like is the one from Shaun of the Dead, where when they're trying to act like zombies, the actress Diane, who's trying to teach the others how to be a zombie, says, they're vacant with a hint of sadness.
Yes.
And that's totally Bub for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And there are hints there if you follow. Like, for instance, when he responds with the salute, the first thing you think is, oh, so there's a good chance this guy was in the military in some capacity when he was alive. So you're getting like these echoes of what this person might have been. And he's not even aware of it, but it's like coming back. And again, the music thing, it's childlike. It also is a nice connection back to Frankenstein's monster. There's a lot of elements of that. And of course, like I was mentioning, in choosing to do what he does by the end of the film, Bub makes a choice that is not only a conscious choice, that is far more of a self-possessed thing to do than any of his fellow reanimated corpses would do, but he also chooses to do something that is not remotely zombie-like, but is entirely human. And in making that choice, he's sort of reclaiming a bit of his humanity. And in a way, it's one of the characters that would always have been fun to stop back in on again and see what happens to Bub. But I guess, we'll never know.
Well, Romero revisited the self-aware zombie in Land of the Dead with Big Daddy. And so did you see that self-aware zombie changed for Romero, or did he bring any new elements to it at that point?
Well, he brought some new elements in the sense that, yes, in a way, Big Daddy is a next step from Bub. Not only is he also repeating old behaviors, he's pumping the gas, and he evidently did that, and he's aware of things, and he behaves a lot like Bub, but there's also the fact that he becomes an actual leader. Mm-hmm. He rallies the others, and there are a few of the others, like the cheerleader and a couple of the other characters that are like distinctive. They're made visually distinctive so we can follow them, that sort of become his inner circle. That's not just a horde, that there's an organization, and he's definitely the leader. And, of course, Romero has gone on record as saying that was the whole point. He was exploring the idea that the longer these creatures would remain active, would they begin to develop further and further a connection back to what they were. Interesting thing is, I did a lecture at a Walker Stalker convention about a year ago, and Eugene Clark, who played Big Daddy, was actually a guest at the convention. And oddly enough, someone just because he was there, I guess, and somebody asked a question about Land of the Dead and about Bub and about Big Daddy and what I thought about self-aware zombies. And I was saying when you watch Big Daddy in Land of the Dead, he takes a leadership role, and it seems like he's actually remembering something, but you aren't sure whether he's just going through the motions or if he's actually remembering. And before the lecture was over, Eugene Clark came across the aisle from his booth where he was sitting and came up to the microphone and said, I just wanted to let you know that George actually told me on the set, yes, you actually do remember what you're doing. So we got confirmation from Big Daddy himself that, yes, they are in fact beginning to reclaim some of their human memories. That was the point in Land of the Dead. So Romero was playing with this idea that the longer these creatures existed, they might slowly evolve into some kind of capable version of themselves again. And some fans have problems with it, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the best movie in the world, but where Land of the Dead ends also is a statement of the idea that, maybe these creatures are not going to stay the way they are. Maybe there's a future for them in some way.
Not only was he kind of revisiting his past behaviors, but he sort of thinks, because when they get to the water, he makes this choice of thinking, we should be able to walk over there and go under the water.
That's right. He also figures out strategy, if I remember right, when he puts the gas in the car in that one scene. It's like he's figuring things out. He knows what he's doing. And again, there are bits of that going a lot further back than people think. Because again, if you go back to Night of the Living Dead, the cemetery ghoul at the beginning of the movie stops, thinks, and picks up a rock to get into the car at Barbara. So there are elements of that Romero always kind of had in there. And then as he moved forward with his films, it seemed like he got more interested in the idea of, let's see what happens if they start to become a little more human. And like you pointed out before, there's an element of sadness and identification that comes into it when the zombie creature we're watching is behaving more human. It breaks down the barriers more. It makes it seem more depressing and sadder, but it also is more compelling because they're closer and closer to us.
Now, in a more recent film, such as Warm Bodies, you kind of get to go through a transformation with the character where you're from this kind of not-so-self-aware zombie to that dawning awareness. So talk about how that impacted this notion of the self-aware zombie. Was that kind of a landmark? Or
I think so. I mean, obviously the book came out first, but for all intents and purposes, the movie was certainly seen by a huge audience, and it hit pop culture in a way that the novel even couldn't. I know for one thing that when both the book and the movie came along, it was like people used to ask me things about the differences between vampires and zombies, like we were talking before, this weird binary thing people get stuck in. And I was like, well, one thing I used to say all the time, one thing you'll never see is you'll never really see a lot of zombie romance because that won't be happening in this genre. And then, so the whole world changed with things like Warm Bodies. And that wasn't the only one. There were a number of others. But it introduced a whole new way of looking at it that I just would never have expected. And in addition to that, it brings in one of the oldest cliches in the world, love conquers all, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, love can also cure zombies. So we get that, and it really, in a way, I think, that and then some of the other things we'll probably wind up talking about, like iZombie, I think it speaks to one of the most important things about the self-aware zombie trend, which is we already always say that zombies are us, and we are us, and they're us, and that's one of the main thematic reasons why they're so compelling. But I actually think what's happening is that the self-aware zombie is a way for us to identify even more closely with them, and I think it's tending toward that idea that as we as a culture feel so alienated from one another or so troubled by so many things, we feel like zombies that are losing connection to other people. And I think the self-aware zombie is becoming a trend that's reflecting the fact that we're identifying with them and we want to be cured, which is why we're getting so many variations on a cure. And that cure usually comes hand in hand with becoming self-aware, reclaiming humanity. And while I have sometimes in the past disagreed that we always have this one-to-one identification with the zombie in a story, certainly in the past versions of it, I think in this case, that's what's happening.
Well, Warm Bodies pairs up kind of nicely with Shaun of the Dead, and not in the sense that they both have self-aware zombies, but it seems like Shaun of the Dead leads perfectly into Warm Bodies.
Yeah.
Because there's this sense of everybody's already a zombie before... In Shaun of the Dead, before the zombie apocalypse hits, everybody's kind of in these little bubbles, like going through the motions of their job.
Exactly.
And so they seem like they're already zombies to begin with. And that kind of seems to lead into Warm Bodies, where you've got the zombie trying to come out of his zombieism.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way of putting it, and also a great connection right there. And you're right. I mean, Shaun of the Dead, in a way, like you said, without actually incorporating self-aware zombies, playing with a lot of the same themes. And I mean, I love Shaun of the Dead. I think it's one of the best zombie movies ever. But it certainly has, actually in a way, if you look at it, it has a really, really depressing ending. It seems like a happy ending at the end, but if you look at it from the perspective you just mentioned, it's also worth noting that at the end, they're settling into this incredibly mundane, routine, suburban existence. The very same one, by the way, at the beginning of the movie, she said she was adamant she didn't want to get trapped in.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, it's like, oh, this is what we're going to do with our day. Our whole day is already planned in advance. We know what it's going to be. So really, at the end, nothing has changed, and they're all still zombies. But we're happy about it, because it's all right.
Because it was their choice.
Yes, that's right.
Well, and also I think one of the things that did make Warm Bodies work is Nicholas Hoult is great as, and I forgot his name, R. He calls himself R because ultimately this is kind of a Romeo and Juliet.
It's Romeo
retelling.
and Juliet. Yeah, it's I wouldn't exactly say subtle. We've got R and Julie, so we got that. He's also wearing the definitive American young teenager hero costume of cinema history. He's wearing James Dean's outfit with the red jacket and the white T-shirt and the jeans. So he's got red, white, and blue on. He's our generic identification figure. But of course, the other thing too is a guy like Holt comes in and makes that character what it is, and creates an emotional connection with the audience. And of course, like we were just saying about Sherman Howard as Bub, the whole thing might not have worked if the casting hadn't worked as well as it did. So that's certainly a major part of it right there.
What am I doing with my life? I'm so pale. I should get out more. I should eat better. My posture is terrible. I should stand up straighter. People would respect me more if I stood up straighter. What's wrong with me? I just want to connect. Why can't I connect with people? Oh, right. It's because I'm dead. I shouldn't be so hard on myself. I mean, we're all dead. This girl's dead. That guy's dead. That guy in the corner is definitely dead. These guys look awful. I wish I could introduce myself, but I don't remember my name anymore. I mean, I think it started with an R, but that's all I have left. I can't remember my name, or my parents, or my job, although my hoodie would suggest I was unemployed.
More recently, we've had some TV attempts at the self-aware zombie. We've had a British one, which was In the Flesh.
Yeah.
And iZombie. Let's talk about In the Flesh first. I believe that one came first.
Yes.
And let's hear a little bit from the opening where it kind of sets up a little on what these particular zombies are like and what's going on.
Another involuntary recount memory.
It's getting more vivid.
That's a good sign. It means the cognitive circuitry is connecting again. Like a computer rebooting.
Maybe it means I'm not ready.
No, it means the opposite.
No, I don't feel ready.
That's exactly why you're ready. You're feeling.
It's not just the flashbacks. The medication, All the side effects?
It means your brain's responding, repairing. That's a positive. Count yourself lucky. You don't want to be a patient who doesn't respond to neurotryptolin.
Where do they go? The ones that don't respond?
We take care of them. Your parents, they're looking forward to seeing you again? Why wouldn't they?
Because I'm a zombie. And I killed people.
No. Kieran, what are you? Look at me. You are...
I am a partially deceased syndrome sufferer.
And?
And what I did in my untreated state was not my fault.
Good.
This is an instance where they're trying to kind of bring the zombies back and reintegrate them into human society. So how is this tackling the self-aware zombie in a new way and bringing some new meaning to it?
Well, it was, I can't say enough positive about In the Flesh. I think it was overlooked by a lot of people. It ran a very short time. They only had 2 series, you know, in the British way of saying it, 2 series. The first run was only 3 episodes, and the second was 6. And despite the fact that it had a following, it did not make it to a 3rd series. And to this day, the creator, Dominic Mitchell, has talked about the possibility of a film or doing something. It's also one of those horrible situations where the show ended on a cliffhanger. So I do recommend it to everyone that might be interested, but you have to go into it knowing you're going to be very frustrated by it. But it did bring a lot of it. First of all, it's beautiful. It's set in this fictional village, this village of Rorton. And it was done in Yorkshire, and it's very gray. The landscape itself says a lot about the tone of the show. It's just all this long expanse of gray farmland and stone, but it's beautiful. And one of the main characters, Kieran, who's one of the people that comes back during the Rising, they come back as Romero-style zombies. They're flesh-eating, mindless corpses. But the twist in this is that we find a chemical cure, an antidote, that as long as they continue to take it, reverts them back to a fully conscious version of themselves with all of their personality and memories intact. However, their skin remains gray, their eyes remain white, and then, as we see, the culture sort of demands that for the comfort of the living, they wear makeup and put contact lenses in, and there's a whole bunch of stuff involved about cosmetically trying to fit in. But they are human and they are themselves. But they can also fall off the medication and revert back to being the flesh-eating corpses. But the amazing thing about the show is, for one thing, it covered a lot of issues related to any minority that feels like an outcast, any group that feels like they're disenfranchised from their own culture or their own society. The main character, as it turns out, is gay, and one of the reasons he was actually dead because he committed suicide. This is not a spoiler, by the way. This is set up at the very beginning. This is premise stuff. And so the show actually explored sexual orientation, gender issues, race issues, all through the lens of these creatures and a group of people trying to figure out, are these really our family and friends? Are they not? Are they monsters? And can we take them back into our homes? And the themes explored, it was just brilliant. And on top of it, it adds a whole new twist ethically to the idea, because in most zombie stories, when you got that flesh-eating corpse coming at you, you don't think about it. It's like, well, shoot it in the head. It's a monster now. But if there's a cure out there somewhere and that thing could be your family member or friend again, is it right for you to kill that creature at that moment? Shouldn't you want to do something else and try to save it? In the Flesh explored a lot of these kind of ideas, and it was a fantastic use of the self-aware zombie idea.
I loved that show, and it had, what I loved about it was there was a lot of humor in it.
Yes.
And yet there were moments when it could turn and be really serious.
Oh, yeah.
And hit up a lot of complex ideas in a very kind of casual way. I mean, it never pumped itself up as, oh, look at us, we're dealing with big issues. You just felt like these things were coming up naturally. But one of the things that I thought was quite endearing about Kieran was when he comes back and tries to reintegrate with his family, one of the things the zombies can't do is eat.
Right.
And so he sits down for dinner and his mother says, well, like, can't you pretend? He has to pretend to eat dinner every night. And he's like, nom, 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 nom. Very good, Mom.
And see, again, there's like that whole other layer there, which is like, you just think any person Like say somebody like someone's gay in the family and somebody doesn't like that and says, well, just can't you pretend to be straight? Or there's someone of another culture. It's like, well, can't you just act like this? Well, this is about accepting people for who they are. And In the Flesh uses zombies to do that. And on top of it, it created a very interesting twist on this whole self-aware idea. Like I said, I can't say enough good about it. I think it was very well done. I also think it's a real shame that we lost it. And who knows, maybe there is a future for it at some point. But I certainly think that they demonstrated that they could really use this genre to make a lot of pointed comments about our culture.
And one of the interesting turns it takes, too, is they have some characters who are part of a vigilante group that is out to rid the town of the zombies, or the zombies that have been kind of rehumanized, or however you want to call them.
They don't see them as their family and friends, so they want to get rid of them. Right.
And so they go on these vigilante sprees at night, pulling people out. And I have to say that scene was really creepy and scary when they start going through the town and pulling people out and asking them, are you one of the zombies or not? And it brings some interesting issues home for that, because I don't think I'll try not to give something away too big, but there's a character who is part of this vigilante group who has to confront the fact that his son comes back, and that was an amazing episode.
Right, and how different is someone's perception when it's not someone else's family member, but their family member. Suddenly things are different. And besides the vigilante group, not to spend too much time in the flesh, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it as much as you want to, but the other dynamic that was interesting too was, besides that, and there was like the interment when they go through the early stages of bringing them back in, and obviously it's not at all difficult to say there's parallels to things like referencing the Holocaust or any other issues of genocide, or systematically dealing with another group, ethnically or racially in a culture. You see a lot of echoes of that in this. There's also that whole thread where there's a group within the reanimated, within the risen, who have decided to completely embrace their nature and say they are actually from God. That was, by the way, I'm glad I mentioned that, because that actually is one of the things I found most fascinating about In the Flesh. There are many zombie stories that don't bother to deal with what's actually sort of the elephant in the room, which is reanimated corpses coming back. Well, what does this mean in terms of a sense of faith or religion or an existence of an afterlife or a deity? And some stories explore that in certain... I mean, Walking Dead explores it in a certain way through its human characters, whether they have faith or not. But within the flesh, there was this fascinating idea where the zombies themselves believed themselves to be sort of the next stage of humanity, the anointed of God, and that they were supposed to be here, and that therefore they should embrace what they are and consider it beautiful. And again, it's all metaphor. It's all about people exploring their identity. And I guess what's really coming out of our conversation is that everybody should go watch In the Flesh right now.
Exactly. Go out, watch it, and then demand either another series or some sort of follow-up so we can get some sort of resolution to it.
Yeah, I think that's what's necessary.
Now, an American show, iZombie, kind of deals with a little bit of some of those ideas, but with a little more overt levity. So tell me what you think of iZombie.
Well, iZombie, just like Walking Dead, is a show that came from a comic book series. I like the fact that one of the creators, Mike Allred, his artwork appears in the show in the title sequence, and it's a nice little nod that keeps the DNA of its origins alive. But the series is slightly different than the comic, and we have Liv Moore, certainly one of the truly obvious metaphorical name choices for a character ever. Liv Moore, she's someone who works in the medical examiner's office. She died kind of, at a boat party where some people were exposed to zombies, and there's an ongoing mythology story in iZombie that's continuing to unfold in its second year right now that involves a drug that may have been part of it, a drinks company that may have been developing a sort of power drink, like a Jolt kind of drink, that may also have led to just this minor little problem of accidentally causing zombies. And she's been discovering what it means for her. Now, she's completely aware. She's still herself. She's trying to maintain relationships with family and friends. A lot of that gets sort of resolved or settled in one way or another during the first season of the show, but they're exploring a lot of other issues in the second year. And the basic rules as far as zombies are concerned in this is that when you're a zombie, you're still completely yourself and still completely human, except you're now virtually immortal, really, if you look at it from that perspective. You can be killed, but you're going to survive a lot of human things. Your skin's paler, and you have to eat brains. You have to eat human brains. And the nice little hook they came up with for this, as far as American television, which is, of course, dominated by police procedurals, is that every time she eats a brain, she gets some of the personality and the skills and memories and abilities of that person, thus enabling her to help solve the crime, of course. But then it also gives the star, Rose McIver, a chance to play a lot of different things, because Liv will then exhibit behavior that's obviously different depending on whose brain she ate that week. Like you said, it's funny, it's much more light. It definitely does explore a lot of the same ideas, but it's a superhero series, really. It's taken the zombie idea and folded it directly into the superhero genre. And she's really a hero.
Let's hear a scene from this where she confronts her boss or coworker and discovers that he's discovered that she's a zombie.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Am I fired or getting a physical?
Fired? I have like a billion questions for you. I'm contemplating asking you to move in.
How long have you suspected?
Since Raul Cortez. The gangbanger gunshot victim. You finished the autopsy for me? Well, the detective on his case needed me to open him back up. Guess what he was missing?
A strong male role model?
And half a pound of brain. See, after I confirmed that you were a survivor of the massacre, I started, opening all the bodies you finished off for me. Resting heart rate. 10 beats per minute.
How have you been so normal to me?
What am I supposed to be?
Freaked out, leading torch-wielding villagers to my apartment? I've been terrified about somebody finding out about me for months, and you're acting like it's the measles I've contracted.
So, no one else knows?
God, no.
I mean, that must be hard. Dealing with this on your own.
Just so you know, regarding my unique dietary needs, I do it as infrequently as possible. If I don't eat, I become dumber, meaner. And I'm afraid that if I let it go long enough, I'll go all George Romero.
The hot sauce?
Pretty much the only way I can taste anything is if it has at least 6 chili peppers next to it on a menu.
I really do like this notion of eating the brains gives you something of the person whose brains you're eating. I thought that was a really nice development in kind of the zombie folklore.
I like the idea, too. I mean, certainly, like we said, it's a lighthearted show. It's mainly driven to be a sort of character-driven police procedural and sort of a romance show at the same time, too. She's got an ongoing romantic relationship that either is working well or not working well, depending upon the circumstances. And the idea is, can she continue to live some sort of meaningful life when technically she doesn't have one? But it's really endearing. They've done a lot of interesting things with it already in just a year and a half or so. And the hook, that gimmick, gives them a lot of opportunities to do different inventive things. It's also one of the rare occasions where a zombie show exists basically in our universe, in a universe in which zombie pop culture exists.
Yeah.
So the show regularly makes references to, the first episode had a clip from Night of the Living Dead in it. So the people in this world are aware of the idea of a zombie. And very often that's a frustrating thing for fans. You watch a zombie movie and nobody ever seems to have any idea. It's like no zombie movies exist in the world of the zombie movie. But in iZombie, they know.
Well, I think it was Shaun of the Dead where somebody mentions the word zombie and Shaun's like, no, don't use the Z word.
Any zombies out there?
Don't say that. What? That? What? That? The Z word. Don't say it. Why not? Because it's ridiculous. All right.
That's right. We're not using the Z word. No, it's silly. Yeah. So iZombie is very aware. And of course, the rules, they have to figure out what actually works within that universe. But it's a universe where they've certainly seen some movies, so they can figure that out. The one thing actually I've mentioned on the podcast I do is the one thing I can never figure out so far is she eats a lot of different brains and sometimes develops extraordinary abilities that enable her to solve a particular crime or confront issues, some of which seem like they'd be very useful over a long period of time, and yet she never seems to store samples of those in any way to go back to them. It always made me wonder, if you found out you ate the kung fu brain that turned you into a ninja, wouldn't you want to keep a piece of that in the freezer somewhere just in case? But they haven't done that.
Unless they mean you have to devour the entire brain in order to...
Yeah, I don't know.
They haven't clarified that.
They're going to have to make that clear for us so we know what's going on.
Well, and then you could have a whole franchise of, bottle all the different brain types. And
That's right. Well, we know Blaine's doing that with some of the stuff he's delivering to people, so... Well, for people who see the show, they'll understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an underworld that's providing brains to the secret zombies of the world, because it's not an apocalypse in iZombie. It's very much a functioning real world in which quite a number of people have crossed over but are still trying to maintain lives. So it's a very interesting dynamic there, too. There's like a secret they're keeping, which in itself is a metaphor. It's just anybody having a secret other life.
You mentioned that iZombie comes from a comic or graphic novel. Is this self-aware zombie as prevalent or more prevalent in the literary world than in film?
I would say that probably used to be the case. And I would think that now that things have shifted and we see so much of that going on in, I guess, what you could argue is the mainstream, in the sense that the vast majority of people that are media consumers, we're talking about film and television, I would say that shifted. But I would think, yes, that you probably found a lot more experimentation with that kind of storytelling and what can we do with these creatures that's a little different if you delved into some of the literature that was going on prior to this time, and certainly some comics, and just the fact that we're seeing so many of these where the source material is from a novel like Warm Bodies or a comic like iZombie, it gives you some indication that the trend was actually happening earlier in those media, and then it's starting to cross over now, and it's becoming popular now. So there was a whole audience of people that were very well aware of these things and enjoying them in that level. But I think it's really grown, and the reason we're talking about it is how much it's grown in popularity, and it's become a trend that I think I mentioned earlier. It's troubled some classic zombie fans, but it's undeniably very successful, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it, too.
I don't know. I think that anything that appears within a George Romero film should not trouble a true zombie fan.
That's right. Yeah, we just have to say, look, there's Bub, there's Big Daddy, it's all okay.
Exactly.
That's right.
Relax.
Just calm down. And, well, and like I always say, I have a very wide-ranging interpretation of what qualifies as a zombie in the genre. I often find myself in, well, let's charitably call it debates with people about that, because ultimately the term zombie has become this really fluid umbrella term for a wide range of stories we tell now. And the ultimate thing is you can choose whatever zombies you like. I mean, there might be a version of this creature that means more to you or entertains you more, and if that's the thing you enjoy, fine. And the nice thing now is that it's proliferated into so many different permutations that there are lots of other possibilities. I guarantee you now there are people watching iZombie that would never consider themselves a horror fan or would ever watch a classic zombie movie. It would be completely insane for them to think of it, but they're loving iZombie because it's taken that and it's incorporated into something more familiar for them and entertains them. And it's just fine with me.
I think Shaun of the Dead served that purpose, too. I know a lot of people who weren't horror fans could get into Shaun of the Dead a little more easily because there's this nice comic element to it and romance that kind of lulled them before the gore came in.
Right, and as I've often done, that's one of the main films, as you probably would expect, that I use in the class. And one of the things about that is, one is that I love the fact that it's humor, but it's not a satire. It's not making fun of the zombies. That's deadly serious, and that's real in that universe. The humor is just coming organically from the characters. So it's like the kind of humor you would derive from living in the real world with real people, not a parody. And then the other thing, of course, is how amazingly that film takes a left turn into absolute tragedy and pathos and is like hooked you at that point. So by the time it gets to that, I've seen people who look like they're hitting a brick wall. And you probably know the part I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And because they, up to that point, it's like, oh, this is always going to have this little comic element to lighten the mood, and then suddenly they realize they're emotionally invested in all these characters, and then something hits. It's like, oh my God. And I think that's one of the reasons that movie is excellent, is because it can do both, and it balances them so well.
Well, and what it does so well, so many horror films will have this padding at the front where they feel like, okay, we need to let you get to know the characters, and we'll throw in 20 minutes of mindless stuff. But what Shaun of the Dead does so well is that quote-unquote padding part of the film, they're really developing the characters so that you you come to love them.
Mm-hmm,
And so
absolutely.
when it does take those turns, you are, exactly as you said, so emotionally invested in them that you're wrapped up in the film. And everything that they set up in the beginning pays off in some way at the end.
That's one of the reasons why I love all those movies that team have done.
Yes.
They're Edgar Wright and that whole group, and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and all those. The Hot Fuzz is another one. I mean, of the three, there's Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and World's End of this little trilogy. But in some ways, I think Hot Fuzz is even superior. It's some of the most impressive structuring of a story. And like you said, there's nothing more satisfying. It's like every little element, dialogue echoes throughout, where like a phrase that feels like something thrown away at the beginning as it turns out, is exactly what the rest of the plot is going to be. And you don't know that until the end, and then you realize this is just beautifully written.
Yes.
So, yeah, it really rewards multiple viewings, too.
It sure does. I want to ask you about one film where I don't really think these are self-aware zombies, but Peter Jackson's Dead Alive.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure you'd call them self-aware, but this is one of the few times I can recall where you've actually had zombie sex. So they were obviously aware enough of each other.
Yeah, at least that much.
So I don't know where you'd qualify them, those zombies in Dead Alive.
Yeah, they're an interesting example, I guess. They sort of exist in a weird area. It's one of those movies that actually is a good test, too. You can really get a sense of the kind of zombie fan you're talking to, or what sort of awareness they have, a lot of other things that have even seen that movie. And for those who don't know, you might also see Brain Dead turn up as Dead Alive, which is the title it was released as here. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you can watch it and actually see the same Paths of the Dead in that movie, where they get the creature at the beginning. What is it? The plague-carrying...
The Sumatran rat monkey.
Yeah, but it's just insane. That movie is just one of those examples of pure insanity in a film, and just an incredible piece of work. In many ways, I would say Brain Dead is one of those kind of movies that's like a living cartoon.
Yes.
It's like a cartoon come to life, all the gore, all the insanity, all the craziness, and it's definitely one of the zombie movies that sort of stands alone as something really unique. I think the term that sometimes comes up and people describe it as splatstick.
Yes.
So, combination of slapstick and splatter, and I think that sums it up pretty well.
I think the highest amount of blood possibly in any film I've seen.
Yeah.
Well, to go from something really extreme and outrageous like that, let me ask you about another film. And again, I'm not sure these quite qualify as self-aware, but they're definitely pushing the envelope in terms of our kind of traditional zombie, is Pontypool.
Oh, I haven't seen that in a very long time, but obviously that one, it's one that often gets recommended, too, because it's just one of the most original ideas that qualifies as a zombie movie, but certainly is using the metaphor in a way that's so unique, where it's basing it entirely on communication and language.
Yes. The disease,
and the fact that,
zombieism is spread through language, which I found so fascinating.
It can't be. It's impossible.
What's impossible, Doctor?
It's viral. That much is clear. But not of the blood. Not blood, not in the air, not on or even in our bodies. It is here. Where? It is in words. Not all words, not all speaking, but in some. Some words are infected. And it spreads out when the contaminated word is spoken. Oh, we are witnessing the emergence of a new arrangement for life, and our language is its host.
In many ways, I think it's a movie where the idea is stronger than the thing itself. It's like that idea is the core. That's just such a brilliant concept. The idea that just speaking and just passing along information, just words, are the danger, and that carries an infection. And it's certainly worth it for anybody to check it out. But I know for a fact it's one of the ones that certainly divides a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It's certainly on the periphery in terms of what would be considered the traditional zombie genre, but I certainly would count it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a zombie film, but I tend to describe it to people as it's a zombie movie without zombies.
Right, yeah. It definitely will not have the kind of payoff that people would normally expect. But it certainly, I would argue, is one of the most meaningful of recent movies because it came up with something which is kind of hard to do right now, especially with a genre, which is to come up with sort of an original take on the idea and say, let's use this metaphor in a different way. And unfortunately, I mean, they can be good, they can be bad, but they tend to follow a certain pattern. And so when you see something original like this coming up with something very different, it's certainly worth taking a look at.
What I think it taps into that made it so appealing to me is that when the people change or turn, you really see humanity slipping away in them.
Yeah.
And that was really scary.
Can you think?
I can. Yeah.
Stick to simple questions. Simple.
Simple question. Simple.
That's it. He's gone. This is what he is now. He's just a crude radio signal. He's seeking.
Simple.
It's the idea of losing, because then you're identifying, and then it's like that's what it would be like to lose yourself, and to lose everything you are. And of course, then there are other zombie movies where zombieism is a metaphor for, say, like Alzheimer's or something like that, and then it can be incredibly uncomfortable. Recently, Maggie, and we're not talking about self-aware so much, although in a way she's a self-aware character throughout, but she's becoming a zombie. Abigail Breslin plays a zombie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is her father, and that one's a really, really torturous, slow burn, depressing story that really is ultimately the story of losing a family member to a terminal disease. And a lot of these movies do that too, where it becomes, like you were just saying about Pontypool, there's a level where it can become so close and so intimate in the way it feels that it's too uncomfortable. That's why a lot of people I know turn away from horror in general, because the whole point is it's supposed to be pushing buttons. It's supposed to be making you feel uncomfortable. That's part of what it's about.
You have to embrace the darkness.
Yeah, and you understand that better, and you understand yourself better. In fact, while you're saying about what's self-aware and what's not, it's worth mentioning another classic that's also a mix of humor and horror, which is Return of the Living Dead.
Yes.
And those zombies are also pretty self-aware. They speak. They're aware of what they want.
Send more paramedics.
Yeah, and then they're not quite fully human in their behavior like iZombie or Warm Bodies, but they are definitely self-aware.
Well, let's play a scene from that, which is when they're actually talking to not even a whole zombie, but a piece of a zombie, and kind of asking them about what that condition feels like.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
Brains only.
Yes.
Why?
The pain.
What about the pain?
The pain of being dead.
It hurts to be dead.
I can feel myself rot.
Eating brains. How does that make you feel?
It makes the pain go away.
I'm glad you brought that film up because I had not thought about that. It had not come to my mind when I was thinking about self-aware zombies, but it is completely within that realm because that character is so much aware of the condition that she's in and conveying that to the other characters.
Yeah, and all the others are self-aware to varying degrees. I mean, then you get the characters doing the running joke about send more cops, and the thing is that they're talking. They're ordering out. And then the boyfriend character, he's speaking and having a full ongoing conversation when he's definitely crossed over. So they are self-aware. It's interesting in a way. I mean, I didn't think about it myself until we were deeper in the conversation, but it's a good one to bring up because it's one that's very well respected by a lot of fans. It's one of the truly great zombie films, and yet I don't think a lot of people would immediately put it in this category. But it definitely works.
And you also have the two characters who are transforming.
Right.
And again, their humanity is slipping away, but they are very much aware that they are going through this change and transition and pondering what it means.
Yes, and it is so painful to watch, almost literally, since they're going through rigor mortis while they're still aware of what's going on. Oh, it's awful. And I recently saw this past Halloween, I went to an event at the Senator Theater in Baltimore where they were debuting a local filmmaker, Kevin Perkins, had just finished a movie.
Yes.
My Boring Zombie Apocalypse.
Which I got my brains blown out in that film.
And I appear for 2 seconds in my classroom. And I think we're all in it.
We're all in it.
And then they also ran Return of the Living Dead, and it was such a joy to see that in a theater with a group of people that largely already knew it very well. But there were, you could definitely tell there were also quite a few who had never seen it before, and they were having a great time. And that's another good example of one that is very 80s as that movie is. Aspects of it still stand the test of time, and it's still a classic zombie movie. But yeah, it works perfectly with our category because it definitely has creatures that are not the zombies you would expect.
Are there any other self-aware zombies that we haven't touched on?
Oh, I'm sure there are probably at least a dozen other good examples that we probably are not thinking of at the moment. Like I said, there are examples of these kind of creatures and more human zombie-like characters throughout the whole history of the genre, but what's happened lately is a boom in popularity for that kind of story, so we're seeing a lot more of them. I'm sure we could find many more examples if we had the time to look them up, but yeah, these are certainly some of the most popular and most prevalent right now. I certainly expect that we'll be seeing a lot more of it because I think it's the version of the character, of the creature, that a lot of people are responding to now.
What do you see for its future? Do you think that it's going to morph or change in other ways, or do you see anything in its evolution possibly?
Well, always a difficult question to answer. What I used to say was, like, people would ask, well, what's the future of the zombie genre? And I used to say, well, you know, the question is, what are we going to be afraid of in 5 or 10 years? And whatever that is, that will be what the zombie of that era will be representing. And it will morph and evolve to fit that particular theme. I think that's still the case. I used to say also that it seems inevitable that there will be a peak and a valley, and that we'll reach a point where this surge will stop. However, we're currently still experiencing the longest continued surge of popularity in the zombies since they began. They used to be cyclical, and it used to tend to go along, like horror in general, with any time this country was like in a war or had a major traumatic event, you'd see it rise and fall like a roller coaster. And yet after 9/11, we never stopped. The zombie came rushing back in with 28 Days Later and the Dawn of the Dead remake and the Walking Dead comic. And then by the time we got a few years in, the Walking Dead TV show came on and cemented them as a mainstream thing. So I don't see them going away anytime soon. I don't see them really waning much in popularity. I think the zombie is always going to be a regular part of our mainstream media experience now for the foreseeable future. As for what they will be, I think self-aware is definitely a major trend that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. I'm not sure what other permutations there may be, but the question will always remain, what are we afraid of? What are we concerned about? What scares us individually? And that's what the zombie is going to become.
Well, I want to thank you very much for speaking with me. We have tried to talk for a podcast
for that's right. Yeah,
quite a long time. And it's been a real pleasure because zombies are one of my favorite things.
Well, obviously, I'm always happy to talk about zombies. So, yeah, no, I'm glad we finally got the chance. It was a real joy to do.
So where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter a lot. So if you go to @DoctorOfTheDead, oddly enough, that's where you'll find me. And together with my producer and co-host Scott Woodard, we do a podcast called Doctor of the Dead. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it at drofthedead.com, YouTube too. And every episode of Doctor of the Dead, when shows like Walking Dead are running, we try to do it weekly and cover every single individual episode. And this past fall, it was insane because we covered every Walking Dead, every Z Nation, Ash vs. Evil Dead, iZombie. They just got to stop for a while and give us some rest.
Time to catch up.
Yeah, but Walking Dead's almost back, so we'll be doing that. And most recently, we did an episode that people have been asking for a very long time. They asked us to do the classic Romero film. So we just recently did an episode, number 68, appropriately enough, on Night of the Living Dead. And we'll cover the other Romero films as we move forward, too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, you brought up Ash vs. Evil Dead. That was such a peak of happiness for me to see Ash come back and in such prime form.
Oh, and the moment the show began, both Scott and I were saying over and over again, and then we went online and found everybody we knew saying the same thing, which is we were calling that show a gift. It felt like a gift. It felt like we shouldn't have this show, but we're getting it. And it was wonderful from start to finish. So
every week, it was something to look forward to.
Yeah, so glad to know, right almost from the start, don't worry, there's going to be a second season. So,
well, they were smart to greenlight that early on.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think I fell in love with the show with the first trailer. The first trailer they had for it, I was going like, oh, yes, they get it. Sam Raimi is back, and he's going to give us what we want.
Yeah, there's no question. With everybody involved, it was just a case of it feels exactly right. And on top of that, they added new people that felt right, and the whole thing was just, like I said, it was a gift. So, yeah, we had a great time talking about that. Mainly our talking about that wasn't all too thematic and academic. It was mainly just us laughing a lot. So,
just geekgasm stuff. That was what we were doing. It was just like, hey! I mean, we were thinking, I think by the third episode, we were going like, is there a decapitation quota? Are they upping it with each show? It's just little things like that. And Lucy Lawless was in it. Oh.
And we knew the cabin had to be back. So, that happened. It was like, oh, this is wonderful.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I can't tell you how much fun it is to tell people at a public radio station that, excuse me, I'm going down to talk to the doctor of the dead.
Well, I'm glad to have done that for you. That's great.
All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to another edition of the KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. Coming up later this month, we'll have a discussion of Black exploitation films in honor of Black History Month. And Horrible Imaginings Film Festival will be hosting a screening of Ganja and Hess as part of Black History and Women in Horror Month. So until our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Paint Care, offering households and businesses in California more than 800 leftover paint drop-off sites for recycling. Quantities of 100-plus gallons of paint may qualify for a large volume pickup. Learn more at paintcare.org.